Hey everybody. This is going to wrap up the videos on cocaine. Okay, it might be a little bit long, but I'll try to keep it straightforward. Okay. So there's a lot of stuff happening in this table, but really what it's showing is psychological effects of taking psychomotor stimulants like cocaine, mild to moderate effects, and then compared to like high doses, which would be the severe effects. There's a couple of these that I want to draw your attention to. So mild to moderate, you have mood amplification, so it's going to make you feel good. But then in really high doses, that mood gets elevated so much that it turns into irritability and anxiety. So it's sort of like, think about mood as a spectrum, right? Mild to moderate effects are going to have heightened energy, but severe effects can lead to extreme energy or exhaustion. So that's like total opposite ends. Let's see, we're going to skip one. We already know that the dopaminergic system, particularly the nigrostriatal system, is important for movement, right? So in mild to moderate effects of cocaine, you can have a motor excitement and restlessness, so like movement. And then in severe effects, you can have compulsive motor stereotypies. So what that is, and I know I mentioned it in a previous video, stereotypical behavior or stereotypy in rodents, it manifests as like this picture here, like this compulsive like licking and grooming of the face and body. And what happens, the rodent will just like kind of punch in a corner and just do this and just not stop. So an animal on a low dose of cocaine will like walk around and run around and do stuff like that. But an animal on a very high dose of cocaine, and this is true for amphetamine too, the animal will have this compulsive licking and grooving stereotypy behavior. Humans do this too. So someone who's had a really high dose of cocaine will do a lot of like lip smacking and like jaw grinding and things like that. And that's the same kind of stereotypic behavior. Let's see. There's one other one that I wanted to talk about. Let's see, cocaine and other psychomotor stimulants as an appetite suppressant. So a lot of like diet pills, which are really dangerous. They're really just amphetamines. So you can see the mild to moderate effects are mild to moderate anorexia. The behavior of anorexia, that's different from the disorder of anorexia. That word anorexia just means reduced appetite. But the disorder of anorexia obviously is something a little bit different. So something that's anorexigenic means it reduces appetite. Something that's orexigenic means it increases appetite. On the vocab for today, I'm not going to test you on that, just an FYI. The last one I wanted to talk about is important, and this is going to come back later when we talk about antipsychotic drugs. So you can see the mild to moderate effects of cocaine and amphetamine cause inflated self-esteem. So, you know, you feel pretty damn good about yourself, right? But severe effects include delusions of grandiosity. So a delusion is a false belief, right? So a delusion of grandiosity might be like, I'm the king of the world, you know, like obviously not, but you know, whatever. Are there any psychopathologies that also are marked by delusions of grandiosity or paranoid delusions or anything like that? Yeah, schizophrenia. This is important. So I'm going to kind of like pave the way here. And then at the end of the semester, when we talk about schizophrenia, we're going to circle back to this. Schizophrenia, the positive symptoms of schizophrenia, which include delusions and hallucinations, those are largely because of increased amounts of dopamine in the nucleus accumbens, which happens when you take too many like drugs like cocaine. So people who are chronic cocaine addicts who have really high doses of cocaine have these positive symptoms of schizophrenia that look just like schizophrenia. And that's actually what led us to kind of understand the role of dopamine and at least the positive symptoms of schizophrenia. There's a lot more going on in schizophrenia that's beyond the role, beyond the scope of this video, but we will certainly talk about it. But I just think that's really interesting. Let's see. We've already mentioned this. Smoking cocaine is associated with a rush, right? Because it has like almost no time to absorb and get straight into the brain. That's why that rush happens. Drugs that have bigger rushes are more highly addictive, like injecting heroin into your veins, right? Smoking cocaine, injecting cocaine. Those are the drugs that give you that rush, and those are the drugs that are more addictive. Let's see. People don't typically overdose on cocaine. People that use it a lot, but it certainly can happen. Okay. The way people can overdose on cocaine is because it's a sympathomimetic drug, means that it mimics the activation of the sympathetic nervous system. Please remember that the sympathetic nervous system is what underlies our fight or flight response. And you can go back to that early picture that is in the, I think it was module 2, right, neuroanatomy, and it shows the role of the different neurotransmitters in the sympathetic and the parasympathetic nervous system. So you know that norepinephrine is a really important neurotransmitter in the sympathetic nervous system. So the way that cocaine exerts its sympathomimetic effects is largely through blockade of the norepinephrine transporter in the peripheral nervous system. So some of the effects of taking cocaine include increased heart rate, increased respiration, hyperthermia, so high body temperature, increase in blood pressure, which is related to vasoconstriction. So when you squeeze the blood vessels really tight, it's going to increase your blood pressure, right? So then that can be really dangerous for your heart and things like that. So that's what happens when people overdose. It's usually, really like you can get a heart attack from, activating your heart too much. Okay, let's see, a couple of other minor things. I do just want to harken back. I know you've seen this before, so I'm just going to talk about this super fast. These are the two main dopamine pathways in the brain, and this is largely what cocaine exerts its effects on. So we've got this will be relevant on the next slide. So we've got our mesocortical and our mesolimbic pathways, right, or mesocortical limbic. So the mesocortical pathway is the ventral tegmental area through the prefrontal cortex. And then let's see, the mesolimbic pathway is the ventral tegmental area to the nucleus accumbens. There's certainly other areas involved, but those are sort of like the major players. And that's thought of as the brain reward circuitry. And then in blue, we've got our nigrostriatal pathway, which is the substantia nigra up to the basal ganglia and other regions of the striatum. And that's more of a motor pathway. Okay, but cocaine is going to exert effects on all of these things. Now, we've learned a lot about the effects of activating and inhibiting these brain areas because of what we know about cocaine and amphetamine, and then what we know about doing 6-hydroxydopamine lesions. Remember that that's that neurotoxin that selectively targets dopaminergic cell bodies. Okay, so what you can do is you can do what's called a microinjection. So you inject a very small amount of that drug into discrete brain areas in the animal, and then you can see what happens. So these are really good somatic interventions to let us see what the role of different receptor systems with different neurotransmitter systems and things like that. These are really great experiments, and we've learned a lot about neuroscience because of experiments like this. So just to give a handful of examples, and yes, you need to know this. If you inject psychostimulants like cocaine or amphetamine into the nucleus accumbens, you're going to get increased locomotor behavior. If you inject it into the striatum, which is sort of a broader region, which can include the nucleus accumbens, also the basal ganglia, you're going to get increased stereotyped behaviors. Okay, so the stereotype is more of that that licking and grooming and things like that. But both of these are going to cause locomotor activation, but injections into the striatum, because that's more of a motor area, you're going to get those stereotyped behaviors. And remember, okay, 6-hydroxydopamine is that neurotoxin to dopamine. It is neurotoxic to norepinephrine neurons, and just depending on how you're doing it, you can inject another drug that saves the norepinephrine neurons, so just depending on the way you do your experiments. Okay, so if you lesion the nucleus accumbens, you're going to get decreased locomotor response following systemic administration. So that means an injection like into the body. So that drug is going to go everywhere in the body. So systemic is just like a shot. So if you basically kill the nucleus accumbens, give the animal a low dose of cocaine, you're going to get decreased locomotor response. So kind of same thing in the striatum. If you do a 6-OHDA lesion of the striatum, which again is a broader brain area, you're going to get decreased stereotype behaviors following systemic administration of a higher dose psychostimulant. That's because you're not going to get stereotype behaviors with a low dose of psychostimulants. And then again, if you kill the nucleus accumbens with a 6-OHDA lesion, you're going to get the decreased reinforcing effectiveness of the drugs. It's not as rewarding. Okay, so what does that mean? Think back to our animal models of addiction, right? And the textbook talks about a handful of examples of these. If you do a 6-OHDA lesion of the nucleus accumbens, then that animal is less likely to operantly condition, like press a lever for an injection of cocaine and things like that. They're not as rewarding. So that tells us that if you kill the nucleus accumbens, you're blocking rewarding properties of the drug. Okay. And then finally, an amphetamine microinjection into the nucleus accumbens is rewarding to the animal, same as a cocaine microinjection, which I mean, I think we all already knew that, right? But it's important to have done this early research to tell us that we know this now. Okay, let's see. Last thing I want to talk about here is You can do these genetic manipulations where you can raise animals that are deficient of certain proteins. So there's a genetic strain of mice that are insensitive, or the dopamine transporter is insensitive to cocaine. So that means that cocaine is not going to have any effect on the dopamine transporter. So what we're looking at now, back up here. So what we're looking at in this graph right now, so we're looking at dose of cocaine along the x-axis and the number of infusions per hour. So that means the number of times basically that rat pressed the lever, or I guess this is a mouse, how many times that mouse pressed the lever to get the drug, okay? So the first one is saline, okay? So you can see the wild type, that's the control, so WT, that's in blue. The heterozygote, that's another like kind of control, and they're pressing the lever a lot just for saline, so they're just like hyperactive. And then the red bar is the experimental group, so it's the DAT knock-in. So what that means is that those are the ones that are expressing this dopamine transporter that's insensitive to cocaine, okay? So honestly, in this graph, the blue bars and the red bars are the ones that we like mostly care about, okay? So, and they're lever pressing for saline about the same, right? No one's gonna lever press for saline because it's not gonna do anything. Fine, that makes sense. All right, but when we add cocaine into it, let's see, you can see that the red ones, the DAT knock-ins, these ones are not lever pressing for cocaine nearly as much as the other two groups. And again, I know that the heterozygous animals are pressing a lot. I think that they're just hyperactive, and that's it. I wish that they had normalized this data a little bit more, but whatever. The main point from this graph is that red line, that DAT knock-in, they don't lever press for cocaine any differently than they lever press for saline. And that tells us that they're not getting the rewarding properties of the cocaine, because if they're not working to get it, they don't care. They're not getting that their behavior reinforced, for whatever reason. So that tells us that the rewarding properties of cocaine are definitely due to the dopamine transporter. Okay. Okay, and then last stuff, this is stuff that we've already talked about, so I'm just going to talk about it kind of quickly. Reinstatement of drug-seeking behavior, which again, this is one of the animal models that y'all are responsible for knowing. So extinguished behaviors can be reinstated. Okay, so first let me just define extinguished, and you should already know this because this was in our article right up too. When you extinguish a behavior, you no longer present the US with the CS. So it's not necessarily that the animal is forgetting the behavior, but the animal's learning something new that the US no longer predicts the CS, right? Or the behavior is no longer going to get reinforced. So you can do this with classical or operant conditioning. So in the case of self-administration, you basically give the animal access to the lever, but stop giving them cocaine every time they press the lever. Eventually they're going to be like, oh, I don't feel so good when I press this lever anymore, so I'm not going to press the lever. So that would be extinguishing the behavior, okay? You can reinstate that extinguished behavior with a priming dose of cocaine, so that means a low dose of cocaine, or a D1 or a D2 agonist directly into the nucleus accumbens, okay? So you're activating dopamine receptors. Both of those kind of do the same thing, right? A priming dose of cocaine is also going to activate dopamine receptors just through a different mechanism. So this is important, right? So this is just small activation of dopamine is going to reinstate this drug-seeking behavior. So think about this in terms of a human addict. What other things can cause increases of dopamine release in the nucleus accumbens? Maybe a conditioned stimulus, like we saw in the paper, like we saw in our example, right, with Ryan Gosling. And when you go to watch Netflix and you see Ryan on the TV, and Ryan has become a conditioned stimulus, so you're going to get a small amount of dopamine release in the nucleus accumbens. We can reinstate that drug-seeking behavior in animals, and we reinstate the drug-seeking behavior in humans as well. So just think about the power that a conditioned stimulus can have over a person's behavior, even after that drug-seeking behavior has stopped. In an animal, the behavior is extinguished. In a human, maybe they've gone through cognitive behavioral therapy. Maybe they've gone through all their withdrawals, and they're saying, okay, I'm not going to do cocaine anymore. But as soon as they get access to a conditioned stimulus, that conditioned stimulus is going to cause increases of dopamine in the nucleus accumbens. And those increases of dopamine in the nucleus accumbens are very, very likely going to reinstate that drug-seeking behavior, which would, in humans, we would call that a relapse, right? So again, just think about the control that a conditioned stimulus has over a person's behavior, and then think about who that person is. If you are a person who has a really good support system and you're like, oh my God, y'all, I saw Ryan Gosling, I need to reach out to my friends because I need some help because I'm really thinking about going and buying some drugs, right? Or what if you're a person that doesn't have that support system and you have that thought, oh my God, I need some help. You don't have anyone to help you, what are you going to do? You're going to go buy some drugs because you need to feel better about yourself, right? That I don't know if any of you have tried to quit smoking or quit drinking coffee or quit some kind of habit that you've tried. It is hard and it is stressful to try to stay away from something that you're trying really hard to not do. And it takes a lot of willpower to do that. And it takes a lot of support. And sadly, you know, the way we treat addicts in our society, many addicts do not have that support. So this is just, again, you know, here's my soapbox, right? We have to support drug addicts in our society. We need to have better access to healthcare. We need to have better access to therapy. We need to have better access to competitive reinforcers. So something safe that would give a person that same, you know, good, not the same good feeling, excuse me. But, you know, give them access to, you know, what does Wake do? Wake does lots of competitive reinforcers. You know, I'm thinking about like Shag the Mag, and I'm thinking about Project Pumpkin, and I'm thinking about the dance marathon thingy that you all do every spring. I think, you know, Wake provides a lot of drug-free opportunities for our students because they're trying to make competitive reinforcers so that our students don't turn to drugs and alcohol to have fun on a Friday night. Of course, this is all pre-COVID. I have no idea what the hell goes on during COVID. Okay, and rant. And that's it for now. I'm going to record one more video just to talk a little bit about amphetamines because I do want you to know what amphetamines are, especially in the context of treating attention. But that's it, and have a great day, everybody. Bye-bye.